Disney Villainous is a quite fun game that has managed to suck away dozens, if not hundreds, of hours of my life at this point, which is not something I necessarily expected when it first released back in 2018. I honestly thought it would be a fun novelty item, something I'd play once or twice, and then would largely just sit on my shelf, like a few other games I've acquired over the years. But it surprised me with the depth of strategy it has and how it just oozes flavor from the movies it's based on, which has led me to do Twitch streams and YouTube videos galore where I either play myself or commentate on others playing. So today, I thought I'd compile my thoughts on each of the, so far, who knows how many more sets I'll come up with, 18 released villains that we have to work with, and put them in a bit of a list. Now, a quick disclaimer, this is not intended as a power ranking and is not a reflection of how strong or weak a villain is in a competitive 1v1 matchup. Instead, they are ranked by how much I like playing as or against them. With that out of the way, let's begin at the bottom with number 18, Captain Hook. I know there are a lot of you who love Hook, who even main Hook, playing him practically exclusively, but he has always rubbed me a bit the wrong way, and that is down to two cards, Neverland Map and Peter Pan. Essentially, whether or not Hook wins largely comes down to where those two cards are in his deck. If they both come out early, there's practically nothing you can do to stop him short of fading him every turn, and that's not fun for anyone. I recently had a game where I employed that strategy as Ursula versus a Hook, and it turned into a horrible slog that went to the league time limit of 40 minutes and was called as a draw. But if the Neverland Map is at the bottom, his permanent fate lock utterly neuters him, and any villain can just walk all over him. So the fact that his chances at victory swing wildly depending on how quickly the map comes out are one thing, but Peter Pan is why I dislike playing against Hook, because it disincentivizes fading him. Now there are other villains in the game where fading them at specific points can help them win, and we'll get to them, but Peter Pan is the worst offender by a wide margin. Evil Queen, Scar, and Yzma are much better implementations for how to do a hero-defeating objective. Yes, I get that it's thematic and that Hook is searching for Pan, doing whatever he can to find him, but forcing Pan to be played in a fate action was, I think, a wrong move. If I were to change Hook, I might remove the must clause on Pan, and maybe give Hook a whisper-style tool that lets him play a discarded hero, and then give the fate deck a way to move Pan back away from the Jolly Roger, probably on John, whose current ability is pretty pointless, and he sings that "Following the Leader" song. Anyway, it's thematic. Number 17, Jafar. Again, yes, I know a lot of you love Jafar and main him, and a large part of that is probably the main reason I don't like him. Hypnotize. And I get it. It's thematic. It's a very cool and unique way to deal with heroes, but it removes a hero permanently from the fate deck so it can never be used again. Sure, you can remove some of them with Crushing Blow, but that can be prevented with scimitars. And a lot of you are going to say that, oh, Jafar is so slow, he needs catch-up tools, but Jafar is faster than some of you make him out to be. If he's discarding often and using scrying, he can get his two items quite quickly and rack up plenty of power to complete his objective with necessary sacrifice. And that perceived slowness is countered by perhaps the most hated card in the game, Deception. I'm not going to begrudge a slower villain the ability to get out an extra fate, but the fact that it can happen during your opponent's turn is a bit of an issue, where your opponent will move to a new location expecting to be able to use the top row of actions, and then because they happen to have two items, there's suddenly a hero there, and they can't do what they wanted to. This, coupled with the maddening phenomenon of being forced to play Abu and or Aladdin too early, is why I dislike playing against Jafar. Some villains can get away with using one or no items, but others are quite dependent on them, and Jafar ruins their day. If I were to change Jafar, I'd probably swap the pretty useless Treachery with a Snap Out of It card that replayed a hypnotized hero, yes, even the genie, letting you use their on-play ability again. So you're not fully screwed if Jafar hypnotizes a forced Aladdin, and I might replace Deception with something less rage-inducing, like a Tyranny effect that lets him get through his deck faster. Number 16, Ratigan. For a while, Ratigan was my most hated, but I've softened on him a little bit. The trick is knowing that he has to be fated early and a lot, because without his top row of actions, he becomes a lot less threatening. With so few allies, he's easily fate-locked, and without the power at Big Ben, or the discard at Flaversham's Toy Shop, it takes him a lot longer to get out the Robot Queen. That said, it's still far too easy to defeat Basil once his objective tile flips over, and most fate strategy involves avoiding that entirely and trying to keep the Mouse Queen alive as long as possible. However, I do have more fun playing as Ratigan than I do the previous two. It is quite flavorful, and the Great Mouse Detective is criminally underrated. If I were to change anything, it might be to put the power loss on a fate effect, rather than just on Mrs. Judson, who's usually a one and done and never defeated. Number 15. Gaston! I'll admit, Gaston is a villain I've played the least so far. I'm honestly still trying to wrap my head around how to play him optimally, and I think I've settled on whittling away obstacles with Monsieur Dark while saving a power for "Get out!" just bouncing between the tavern and the woods. But almost all his obstacle removal, his entire objective, is just playing these high-cost effects, and it just sort of boils down to, did you draw them, and do you have enough power? Compare this to Mother Gothel, whose trust gain is tied to other things she does in a wonderfully thematic and strategic way. Gaston doesn't really have much of an engine to speak of, aside from clogging his hand with LeFou. His fate deck is also frustrating to deal with, constantly undoing your progress. I definitely appreciate them wanting to abstract his goal of marrying Belle into something less explicitly creepy, but I'm not sure how well it's worked in practice. It doesn't particularly feel like I'm wooing a sweetheart, particularly not when optimally you want to get her off your board. I think a good change might be to swap out the Show Me the Beast card, which is fairly niche, for an activatable item that retrieves an effect from your discard pile, letting him actually engine build. Number 14. Prince John. We are now past the villains that I have any sort of active dislike for. I do enjoy playing as Prince John, just not as much as those to come. Unlike Gaston, he very much has an engine, with the sheriff collecting power, his bows and arrows and intimidation, and never forget those beautiful, lovely taxes. Like Jafar, he can get to a spot where fate doesn't do anything to him when he's at win condition, but it feels like Prince John has to earn it a bit more. And he's the first of several overshoot villains, where if he not only meets his objective, but exceeds it, he can't be stopped, and it feels justified. That said, of those overshooters, it's the easiest for him to get to his 20 power, which is part of why he's ranked so low here. In addition, at the end of the day, the objective of just get power is a little bland, though perfectly understandable for his character. I'm not the biggest fan of how very few reactive cards are in his fate deck, but Robin Hood and King Richard are punishing enough, particularly early game, that I'm not sure I'd change anything there. Number 13. Lady Tremaine. I'd actually idly thought about how Lady Tremaine could be implemented in Villainous, and Ravensburger came up with something remarkably close to what I had imagined. She feels like a mix of Jafar and Ursula, though more streamlined, with the benefit of development hindsight. That said, vicious practical jokes, as it is currently ruled, being able to choose unplayable cards, is easily the best condition in the entire game, and one more thing is not far behind. When Lady Tremaine's conditions come out at the right time, she is a speed demon and hard to stop. It can be very frustrating playing against her, and it's seeming like you can't do anything, particularly when she's fate-locking you so easily herself, but it's very satisfying playing as her and denying your opponent any leeway. Because when a fate sneaks through her defenses, it can set her back quite a bit, particularly if Jacques manages to discard the cane or the wedding bells. Fun to play as, though often infuriating to play against. Number 12. Queen of Hearts. The Queen of Hearts can be quite a lot of fun. Getting all those card guards out and turning into wickets, amassing ridiculous amounts of power with Very Merry and Birthday and Stopwatch, and then gambling, usually pretty safely, on Take the Shot. Her fate deck is, for the most part, pretty reasonable, and she has several tools for dealing with heroes, allowing her to conserve her wickets. However, the trouble comes if your fate gets reshuffled, and Momravs comes out for a third or fourth time. It's hard to do, but Queen of Hearts is the only villain that can be locked into a position where it is impossible for her to win, if all her allies are in play and moved away from Alice. But this requires multiple fate reshuffles and doesn't happen often. She's fast enough that she doesn't need to worry too much about fate locking her opponent, but not so fast that she's frustrating to play against. A good balance. Number 11. Maleficent. Maleficent is actually the first villain I ever played in my very first 6-player game of Villainous, and to this day I think she is probably the most balanced villain in the game. Her fate deck has the right mix of reactive and proactive cards, and there's no real risk in fating her and accidentally expending a hero that would be more useful later, as there is with Hook and Jafar, as heroes in play can still discard curses with Once Upon a Dream. But on top of this, there are still layers of strategy to curse placement, letting Maleficent make informed choices to protect her win condition. And the Raven is, hands down, the best ally in the game. That said, her flavor's a little bland, as playing her I don't really feel like Maleficent from the movie necessarily, as getting curses on the board is a little abstract, and not necessarily her in-universe goal. Number 10. Dr. Facilier. The man with the friends on the other side. Dr. Facilier can be a lot of fun to play as and against. I understand that a lot of you watching this probably view the Shadow Man the way I view Hook, Jafar, and Ratigan, but I've never had that issue with him. His Fate deck is perfectly capable of slowing him down when needed, and apart from an early Juju or Big Daddy, there's little risk in early Fates either. His design also oozes flavor, and it really does feel like you're stepping into his shoes and shirtless vest, and you can't help but sing along as cards get played. And there's no greater drama in the game than the tension as your opponent picks those 3 cards, for the cards will tell, particularly if the fortune pile has been stuffed thick by almost there. Number 9, Yzma. If you want flavor, look no further than Yzma. From her card names to the 4 Fate decks to Kronk flipping from ally to hero, you really feel like you're scary beyond all reason when you're playing as her. It's also a lot of fun having to keep track of what's in each deck, even when playing against her. She's just so refreshingly different from all the others. That said, that difference has led to a lot of questions about how some card interactions actually work, though most of those have been resolved. However, there are certain cases where you literally can't Fate her because none of her remaining Fate cards are playable. To fix this, I'd simply change her to where you discard a card from a Fate deck if you can't play any of them, instead of playing nothing, putting her more in line with the other villains, and this is a house rule I've actually used, and it works pretty well. Number 8, Pete. When Pete was first revealed, I was honestly a little bummed, because not only was he not even a canon movie villain, his goals looked incredibly generic, as if you were intended to serve as a prototype of what a villainous character could be. However, actually playing him has completely upended my initial impressions. I've since been able to reconcile him as a precursor to the movie villain since his shorts precede feature films, and his goals, which change every game, lend him an Yzma-like quality where you have to plan everything properly and your opponents have to guess what exactly you're up to. He's not the most reliable to win with, but you're usually guaranteed to have fun playing with him. Number 7, Ursula. Yes, I know, I made a whole lot of fuss about Jafar and Lady Tremaine, and Ursula has a lot of the same problems, and yet I love her. It might be because when only the base set was out, everyone thought she was terrible, and I was determined to prove everyone else wrong, or it might be that she led me to a public victory versus a dominant Dr. Facilier, but I almost always have fun playing the Sea Witch, that horrible slog versus Hook notwithstanding. Yes, a lot of her game is just discarding frantically to get to your necessary pieces before Flounder screws it all up for you, but the moving lock token and just the overall weirdness of her gameplay still makes it fun. She's also intensely strategic. Do you gamble and play your items as fast as possible, or do you play it safe and lock them away? Where do you shove all your heroes? Which brings me to the one point against her. Her Fate deck is almost entirely reactive. Everything in there has to be played at a very specific time because none of the heroes, aside from Ariel, have passive abilities and they all do a specific harmful thing. If Sebastian comes out before Triton or Ariel has a contract, Ursula can ignore him. If Ariel comes out before any items can be moved, Ursula can ignore her. That said, Ursula has enough trouble just getting all her stuff out that I'm a little loath to change anything, and certainly I wouldn't change anything in her realm or villain deck. But I think the Fate deck could be made a bit more proactive, with more passive abilities on heroes to encourage you to actually get rid of them, and not have opponents rely so much on return to form, which, come on, why wasn't this just called Under the Sea? Anyway, warts and all, she's a blast, and my favorite from the worst takes it all. Number 6. Hades. Often regarded by others as the worst in the game, Hades is still a hoot and a half to play for me. The progress he can make is a good mix of undoable, pushing back or trapping the Titans, and undoable. Once the Titans are out, Fates can't remove them, unlike Maleficent's curses. Yes, if you're only using his move and item or ally actions, he's pretty slow, especially if Mount Olympus gets blocked, which it likely will be, but that slow buildup of Titans is very satisfying, and he has a surprising amount of tools to deal with heroes. That said, I'd still probably drop the power cost on Achilles' heel and Eye of the Fates by 1 each, because as they are, they're absurdly expensive. Number 5. Scar. I make no secret of my disdain for the movie The Lion King. It's an overrated, good-looking movie with a narrative that makes no sense, and has an insidiously pro-monarchy message that I just can't stomach. Also, the allegory of animals being different people, yet some people eat other people, it just breaks down if you think about it for more than a second. But, despite all this, I thoroughly enjoy playing as Scar, and it's not just because of Jeremy Irons' deliciously sinister performance. Yes, like Hades, he's slow, he can get fate-locked, and happenstance for Fend, you get stuck in a Hakuna Matata death loop. But if you set yourself up right, which usually means not playing Mufasa too early, you can get in extra vanquishes, keep your board clear, and cruise into 15 plus strength. And when you do win, it is immensely satisfying because you know you've earned it, rather than having lucked into having the Scarab Pendant and Magic Lamp in your opening hand. For instance, Scar is hands down my favorite of Evil Comes Prepared, and he deserves his spot as a headliner. Number 4, Cruella de Vil. Cruella took me a little while to figure out. It doesn't help that of all the villains, her goal is the least sympathetic, but she's deranged enough that you can at least empathize with her, I don't know, go-getter attitude. Despite having a vanquish action, her dependence on only 2 allies makes her feel more in the vein of Ursula, and the fact that some of her cards are just straight-up duplicates of Ursula's drives the point home. Like the previous 2, she is quite slow, but that makes her wins all the more satisfying. I love seeing all those puppies build up, getting lots of power out of them with I Live for Furs, then scooping them all up as I nudge Jasper across the board. Her Fate deck is also relatively toothless in comparison to other villains, though with her slowness, she needs all the help she can get. But her Fireplace Pokers and that Devil Woman's let her keep Radcliffe House clear, so she can Fate as much as Ursula, even more fodder for that comparison. And there's just something about that black and white mover sitting on that fire engine red board that's just very appealing. Number 3, Mother Gothel. It won't be controversial to say that Mother Gothel is the single most challenging villain to play as. You have to not only work towards your goal, but also wrangle Rapunzel so she doesn't lose you the game with a slow leakage of trust. But who doesn't love a challenge? Out of all the villains, Gothel is a puzzle to be solved, and it is so satisfying when you can get all the pieces to fit together. Similar to Cruella, her Fate deck isn't all that harmful, and you can usually deal with whatever it throws at you, and you should honestly be preparing for it in the first place. But what I love most about Gothel is the combos. Getting down the crown, a royal guard with a knife going to Rapunzel's tower, moving in the hairbrush, vanquishing your abductee, and playing I Love You Most and netting half of your objective in a single fell swoop is immensely satisfying to pull off. Not to mention you even get to Fate in addition. With all her royal guards, as well as revenge, she can keep her board more or less clear, and make some trust off it to boot. Is she slow? Yes. Can't she get stuck sometimes in a trust leak death spiral? Also yes. Is she nonetheless addictingly fun to play? Also yes. Number 2, Evil Queen! I know what you're saying. Only second? Yes, Evil Queen is the villain I'm probably best known for, as well as the one I've had the most success with. She just clicked with me almost immediately, how exactly to deal with her Fate deck, how exactly I needed to open up the dwarf's cottage and defeat the little girl. It just all made sense to me, storing all the dwarves in the woods, with my move a hero action, making sure Snow White doesn't languish in the cottage, when and when not to brew poison. The sheer power of magic tones, all of it. Evil Queen just hums like a well-oiled machine, and I love it. It's to the point where, aside from the Maleficent matchup, I feel comfortable playing as or against Evil Queen in any situation. I know her that well. I know exactly how to take her down when facing her, and exactly how to speed to victory when piloting her. It's really just the fact that I'd rather play a variety of villains than just always win, that I don't play her at all times. That, and if I did play her all the time, people might start figuring out how to beat me as her, and well, we can't have that. Truly, the fairest of them all. But one more villain remains. Number 1, Horned King. I adore The Black Cauldron, always have. It's a weird little movie that no one saw in theaters that I found on a VHS as a kid, and I never looked back. I love the characters, I love the story, I love the music, I love the groundbreaking animation effects, and boy howdy do I love the Horned King. Creepy, deliciously voiced by John Hurt, just perfect. And I could not be happier that he has joined the Villainous ranks. And not only that, but I actually enjoy playing as him. A miracle! His decks are just full of references to not only the film, but the original books, and it's just bursting with flavor. He also feels in the same vein as the other villains I love, Mother Gothel, Scar, Cruella, in building up slowly to an inevitability. But one thing that makes him stand above beyond the killer aesthetic, love that neon green, is his unparalleled ability to just keep his board clear. Once a couple Cauldronborn are out, those double vanquish actions make short work of anything. You can even get in some extras with We Got You Now, Pig Keeper. Unlike Evil Queen, who clicked immediately for me, it took me some time to figure out how exactly I wanted to play as Horned King. Now it's still a little early. I think he'll be able to hold his own in the competitive scene once people understand him a little better. And that's my ranking of the 18, currently, Disney Villainous villains. Again, not by competitive viability, but by how fun I find them to play as or against. Thanks for watching!